Yeah.
Okay. We are here on another episode of the Old Fashioned Dad podcast. And we have two awesome women that are joining us. Authors, really.
Non-dads. Non-dads.
Warriors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, non-dads. We need to probably make that clear.
Right.
These are moms, warriors for Christ. Authors and every other moniker that seems appropriate and that they want to give themselves.
That's right.
So, we're going to jump into, they don't even know what the topic is.
It's true.
Today.
I thought we were talking about sex.
I thought we were talking about voter integrity. What?
Actually, it might kind of just be a buffet of topics today. So, sex and voter ID and whatever else comes up.
I mean,
so
they go hand in hand, really.
That'd be a weird way to validate the vote.
But as always on the Old Fashioned Dad podcast, because I can never make an acronym out of this, but we're going to go over the whiskey real quick, the cigars that we're smoking, and as always, ready, let's go. We are the Old Fashioned Dad podcast, seeking to love dads and men through the person and work of Jesus Christ, while entering into tough conversations on marriage, mental health, sex, and parenting, all while sipping good whiskey. Okay, so the whiskey that we're drinking today, because the ladies are not, we're going to have to drink for them.
I'll be having a sip of whiskey.
Oh, sweet, great. Is Redwood Empire whiskey based out of Sonoma County in California. Like the whiskey, don't necessarily like the state, but if you live in California, you listen to us, my apologies. Kind of sorry, not sorry. But either way, we have a fantastic whiskey. I don't know a ton about the distillery itself, but they sent some to me. They asked me to try it. I gave my best at trying it, and I'm trying it again, and I don't mind it.
You're trying it again?
Trying it again.
Trying again. It's
How
smooth.
charitable.
I know.
It's smooth.
It's sacrificial, really.
It is.
It's very
Really
drinkable.
sacrificial.
It's whiskey for Jesus.
Yeah,
very drinkable.
I actually might have to go with, this is chosen. I might have to go with Christian's original description of when he first tried whiskey. This tastes like bourbon.
Tastes like whiskey.
It tastes like whiskey. So it's actually good. It's got a nice sweet flavor to it. We're smoking some cigars from some friends that I know nothing about, but it's tasty and it seems to go together with this bourbon.
Yeah, I think they're Nicaraguan, if I remember right.
Okay.
From Chris Flugstad's guest episode.
So that is about as much time as we like to give to the whiskey and the cigars, because we have much meatier topics to jump into.
Are you calling our guest meaty? That is...
I
Triggered.
mean, is that, would that be a
Very triggered.
microaggression? Or
Yeah.
Meaty?
Might be
Meaty?
macroaggression.
I'd go with curvy.
Curvy?
Curvy,
Okay.
there you go.
We have some curvy guests.
Woo! Me too moment, baby.
Our previous episodes might get us canceled. If they don't, then this one might.
Oh, definitely. This one's getting us canceled.
We will offend you. Just stick around.
There you go. And if you are offended, maybe it's indicative that you need to change your worldview.
Anyway, we don't need disclaimers. Let's just let it be what it is.
At any rate, we have two wonderful ladies that I've gotten to know a lot better over this last year and the previous year. Authors of the book Them Before Us. Feel free to introduce yourself. Maybe we'll start with you, Katy.
Okay, so fun fact.
Yes, I love fun facts.
Yeah, so I just listened to an interview Stacy did the other day, and it was so good. Yeah, it was so good, but she talked about how we first got into this because the interviewer asked her.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell that story.
Oh, great.
Because I haven't thought of that story or remembered it for a long time. I went off on vacation and I felt like, just over the course of my 1 week away, I came back and I stepped into what I felt like was a different America, where now we were having this big debate over gay marriage, and that anybody who believed that traditional marriage was important or kids needed moms and dads were bigots. And I had a fire in me, but I also knew I did not have what it took. And I thought, I want to write about this. I want to share about this. I want to develop a defense about this. I wasn't from an intact childhood. So in a sense, I felt like Moses, being called back into the world of my childhood. But I said, I'm not eloquent. I can't speak. And it wasn't like a false humility. I'm like, no, I literally can't do this. And God said, I'm going to send you an Aaron, right? Somebody that can speak for you. So I shared about this in my women's group, and Stacy was a part of my women's group. And I said, so I just feel like God said that he's going to send me an Aaron, like somebody that can go with me and can literally, and then God says, I will teach you both what to say. So that night, Stacy goes in to tuck in her daughter, who just so happened to have some 2-year overdue
It was like 3 or 4 years.
library
It was
CD.
way old. It was a VBS CD. Yeah.
And so she walks in while her daughter's asleep, but the CD is still playing, and she walks into the burning bush part of Exodus where God says, Aaron's already on his way to meet you. And God said to Stacy in that moment, that's you. You're Aaron.
Yeah, chills.
Yeah, it was so cool. And so she called and she's like, hi, I'm Aaron. And I'm like, sweet, I was hoping so. So yeah, that's kind of how we started. And just as an anonymous blog, and now we've published a children's rights book on not just marriage, but every matter of marriage and family, and forward by Robert George of Princeton.
Who's apparently a very big deal.
Yeah, well, we just thought.
Like, I don't know, should we go for the paramount, foremost, leading conservative thinker and ask him? Let's do it.
I heard back from him the day when he said he would write the preface, and I checked his Facebook account, and he was having dinner with Clarence Thomas.
Let's do it.
No big deal. No big deal.
Yeah. So anyway, it's been a great resource. We've had some good feedback, and yeah.
No, right, because truth has a ring to it.
Yep.
So, I think that the lesson to that, if you're sitting out there thinking, I have an itch, I think that something should be done. Katy and I are a couple of nobodies, moms, stay-at-home moms, just swinging from our little teeny internet corner. And we swung and hit enough that bigger people that take up bigger swaths of real estate on the internet started noticing our swinging. And, here we are. So I feel like I know that we've given the world a good manual that says probably a lot of the things that many people already think they might not just know how to communicate that effectively. And hopefully, well, I think we're very effective communicators, but I write my own press, smell my own farts.
Smell your own farts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I invite all of you in because they don't stink.
And it's great on video, so you're safe.
Well, right. That's right. Farts. So we've provided a manual, and hopefully it's the kind of tool that'll start to bring about change because we're right. So you're welcome.
So them before us. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yep.
And you can find the book on Amazon?
Yes, and Target and Christian Books. If you want to avoid Amazon, go to christianbooks.com. They were on back order for a little while. Not because we're selling so many.
But we did.
But we did.
We did sell out the first 2,500, and they printed another 2,500.
Woo!
Yeah.
It's freaking amazing.
Was there something about being on the New York Times bestseller list or something like that?
Yeah, we will be.
That's the plan, but that's not legit.
I mean, don't you have to buy your space in there or something? Yeah, it's kind of a
it's
rigged
not
system.
an actual.
Don't burst my bubble of what I know.
It's all right.
That's right.
I mean, if Mark Driscoll can do it, so can you.
Yeah.
That's right. Aspiring.
So what I really appreciate, I've made it through 7 chapters of Them Before Us, and I went the Audible route.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the narration. The person that's narrating is just fantastic.
Really hot too. I hope she's gorgeous.
Smoking.
She does say so herself.
She does.
But I love listening to it because I think there's a lot of if I was just reading it on my own, I wouldn't catch some emphasis in some areas. And so I would encourage those of you who are auditory learners, go get Audible and download this book. And chapters 6 and 7, I mean, listen to it in its entirety, but chapters 6 and 7, pretty dang good. But I really love this book because it's a focus on putting children's rights before adults' rights or adults' desires. And there's a phrase that's being said quite often throughout the entire book is children's rights are being sacrificed on the altar of adult desire. Did I catch that right?
Exactly right.
Yeah, and which I think is just so. Who coined that? Did one of you coin that?
Probably Stacy.
Stacy. Okay.
She does the words.
She does the words. The wordsmith over here.
Yeah.
But I mean that was so impeccably said. It's like it's really really hard to forget that, and so like that becomes it feels like the cornerstone of the entire book, and it's really focused a lot on the fatherless epidemic.
Yeah.
And what I really found pretty interesting about the book so far, and it might have been in 5 or 6, was the impact that the lack of fathers has on daughters. And from biological, emotional, and psychological development. I thought that was, wow, that was incredible, those statistics and data. You're the data person, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Mostly.
Yeah, so data person, wordsmith person.
Right, you wouldn't read the book without Stacy.
And I wouldn't do the research.
Yeah. So, so like, just so that you guys know what we're talking about children's rights in the family. Children's rights, that term has been misused, abused, and maligned. But children do have a right to their mother and father, and it informs every conversation we have about marriage and family, from the definition of marriage to reproductive technologies to divorce, surrogacy, and all these things like cohabitation, polygamy. We think that they're separate issues, but they're not. It's really just one issue and one question, and that is, are you respecting or are you disregarding the rights of children? So, there's no sacred cows here. Like, nobody gets a pass, right? We say in the book, everybody, all adults, single, married, gay, and straight, everybody needs to conform to the rights of children. So it calls all adults to do hard things.
It's all hands on deck.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that, because that's a call that's echoed through almost every chapter multiple times, and so I think that I guess am I saying this right? Equal opportunity offender.
You bet.
Yes, that is what we are.
Yeah, so everybody is being held to task on this. If you're an adult, we're all being held to task, and children need mothers and fathers, and that's really the big emphasis. And God gave us the family system to help develop kids, and so. But right now, the family system is being utilized to destroy kids.
Yeah. And you guys have a primarily Christian audience?
I believe.
I'd imagine.
Yeah. So
it'd be weird to listen to it if you're a non-Christian. I disagree with everything this guy said, but I'm gonna keep listening to it.
I'm captivated.
Yeah, but that Hawaiian shirt. So Christians, don't ever compromise. Don't ever bow, scrape, or apologize for what God says about sex and marriage. Short of a revival, God's prescription for marriage is probably the only thing that could save this country. So we try to outline in secular terms, using social science and natural law, and mainly...
Yeah, we don't even try. We just did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And 130 stories of kids who have lived through these modern families.
Yeah.
So you know who the real victim is when we get this wrong, and it's not adults. So I think that part of what we needed to do was preach to the choir being Christians who probably think that God's not a bigot, but aren't really sure.
Don't know how to push back against the accusation. Really, feelings informed, but you don't. It's all about love,
right?
And it's so not.
We just need love to make a family.
We do, and sometimes love is super tough.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Sometimes
somebody that would make the most amazing parent has to come to the realization, if they're like single and wanting a baby by choice, or in a same-sex relationship, that parenting is sacrificial.
Yeah.
And you might have to actually sacrifice having a child.
Yeah.
And I think that really shows up, like, I thought that message showed up really clearly. And I know we're kind of going long on this, but we'll get in the topic
But it's
here.
the only thing that matters.
Yeah, it is. Them before us. But I thought that showed up. I know we should have little floaters that go along this way.
Stacey will write your chyrons.
Sweet.
You want that. You want her to write your
But that really shows up in the chapter on surrogacy. I thought that was really like a really strong message. Like, hey, you know what? You might have a really strong desire to have a kid, but it could potentially be just a hard no.
Yeah.
Like just a hard no.
That no matter how strong, it pales in comparison to a child's right to be known and loved by both of the parents that are responsible for their being.
Yep.
No, and I appreciated the chapter on surrogacy, because I knew nothing about it. And I didn't know anything about big fertility. And so like it sounds really dastardly.
It is.
and fairly evil.
It is. They are an exploitive enterprise built solely on profit, whose technology has far outrun any ethical conversation that we're having about what's exactly taking place.
What's taking place is human trafficking.
Yeah,
That's right.
And that was the piece that, like, I was like, holy smokes, because, like, I was thinking that, I was like, this feels like the way that they're describing it, human trafficking, and then, like, the next sentence, you were like, human trafficking.
Right. And that's not us talking. That is much of
the kids.
Much of Europe, right, who has declared this a human rights violation. And the children themselves who are like, I feel commodified.
Yeah, I was bought and sold.
Right.
I'm science's bitch.
I wonder if lawsuits will happen from this.
Yes.
I believe so.
No, so there are definitely legislation being attempted to do things like prohibit anonymity in this process of gamete donation, gamete selling and purchasing.
Donation.
Yeah,
Right,
there we go.
donation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, selling. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Donation.
buying and selling. The donor-conceived groups are pushing back. I think that we give the last word to a guy named Matt Doran, Chapter 7, who flat out says, there's no reform, there's no regulations, this is buying and selling of humans and it needs to stop.
Right, it needs to
legalized.
stop. Yeah.
Legalized buying and selling.
Yeah, unregulated. It's
Yeah.
not, it's
Legalized
just
and
unregulated.
unregulated,
Yeah,
right.
The freaking Wild West.
right.
Okay, well,
How'd you like that?
yeah,
Is that
there we
enough?
go.
Okay, we're
Then
done.
before us, many places. We'll put all that stuff in the links. I highly recommend checking out not just Them Before Us, but all the other writings that we'll put in, like the blog.
Blog's old news, baby. Then Before Us is all there is.
Oh, okay, there it
That's
is.
it.
All right, never mind.
Go
Don't
there.
check out anything else. Just read that book.
We were amateurs back then.
That's
So-
where we worked it out.
So
Yeah.
we need to jump into, because I know that we're running up against the clock, and so it'll either be a really fast conversation or it'll be a part 1 of 5 conversation. So,
What is this topic?
yes. So the topic.
Sorry, before we get started,
Yes.
am I smoking you guys out and the wind's blowing?
No,
up?
I'm fine actually.
Are you kidding me?
You pour me a little
Love it.
whiskey there, just a teeny little
Yeah.
bit.
I know.
Just a teeny little
I
bit.
haven't had to get up since I got here. That's
glorious.
all I asked
I'll
for.
pour some whiskey.
Yeah, the only thing around here that's not allowed to be conservative is the pours. What is up with this?
I don't know. I didn't know
Wow.
where you were on a 3 o'clock on a Thursday.
That's plenty.
Yeah.
Oh, that I gave you way too
Let
much.
me move this over for you. Is that what you need? There you go.
That's all right. I will just.
None of you guys are wearing masks, by the way. I see that.
Well, what is it? A 0.1% chance of passing COVID if you're outdoors and asymptomatic spread isn't a thing. And
I would just feel more comfortable if next time we meet, we all wear masks.
I mean, the
I
first
will.
Stacy is going to kill me.
the first
will.
part of that is you have to be sick for it to matter. But you know.
right.
So the
Science.
topic at hand, because I think Stacy will start slitting throats.
Well, yeah.
The topic at hand that I think Christian and I landed on, we mulled over sex. We're like, yeah, that's a good
Sex.
clickbait. That's a
Everybody
good
does sex.
That's a good clickbait one, but maybe we'll have to have them back to talk about that one. We also thought about nope, sex was about it. What we landed on was Christians and conspiracy theories.
Oh,
Dun, dun, dun.
Fascinating.
get ready to shine.
So
I grew up on Art Bell.
So the way that I was thinking about it.
And aliens are apparently
and-
freaking real.
Yeah.
it's
I
not
had
even
a
a
conversation
conspiracy
about that the other day. Is let you guys just go and say like, hey, here's what we think. Ultimately, I want to be able to say like, this is what a conspiracy theory is. Here's observations, and then I want to have some sort of like at the end, how should Christians respond to this? Yeah, how should we respond to that? And in all my infinite research that I did within the last 10 minutes in preparation for this episode, because I read a Gospel Coalition blog, I
Nice
might
work.
have, I know, right? I might have a direction or a point that might be relevant. So, anywho, conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Are there any conspiracy theories out there right now that exist in the Christian world when it comes to the world?
Well, maybe first it might be helpful to frame what is a conspiracy theory.
If you want to go
what,
that route,
what makes a
that's-
conspiracy theory versus observation or conventional wisdom or whatever? I mean,
Well, let me
guys
let
think?
me back up sooner because I don't think that I have anything. I don't have a corner on. I don't have any major insight into this, but what I will say is we are now in the information age, right? So we've kind of moved through the industrial age, way beyond the Bronze Age, right? But there were different kind of epochs of human history that were categorized by certain developments, right? So now we're in the information age, and now we have access to more information
Then we know what to do with.
than we know what to do with.
And nobody knows anything.
Right. So so that's the question. It's not where do we get information, or how do we get information, or what is the information. Now the question that everybody has to ask is, who do I consider an authority?
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's 100 different positions or observations or even studies, right, that you could select. And so the question that every person is asking, and certainly every Christian needs to be asking, is, what sources are authoritative, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have to choose. I can't have all the information because it all contradicts one another, right? So that is our question. I think the first question you ask before you even say, okay, let's look at this conspiracy theory. Is it factual? What do we need to think about it? First, you have to say, okay, what's your authority? Right? And what sources are you going to consider authoritative so that you can measure what you're reading?
But Katie, I just pick the information that already agrees with my perspective. Isn't that how
Snopes
you
tells
You
determine
go,
truth
go to
these days?
confirmationbias.com.
Exactly. Yeah.
No. Snopes tells me what to believe.
Yeah,
and not
I
believe.
do Google
Yeah.
search. I'm like, don't agree with that. Skip. Don't agree. Don't agree. I agree with that. Oh, there's my source.
There it
Yes.
Is that how it's done these days?
That's how it's done. You got it.
Stacy, you look like you want to say something.
She looks constipated.
Oh, get ready. Prepare.
That's a conspiracy.
The thing that I've been thinking about recently actually does have to do with conspiracy, but I don't think human beings are really capable of conspiracy theories or carrying out conspiracies, right? You get like more than two people involved in something, it's blown, right? But the nature of human beings and the way that the left has handled this crazy power grab and the shutdowns and the control and thinking that they have the authority to tell you whether you can hug grandma or not. There's a certain personality type that sees an opportunity and goes with it. Now, the conspiracy-minded individual would say, well, obviously it's a huge conspiracy. All these people on the left, they're all working in tandem. No, they're not. They're not working together. They have a desire for power and control, and they kind of see which way the wind is blowing and how people have just capitulated and conformed and are running with it. And those among us who want to see like order and some kind of explanation, and well, this is the conspiracy theorist, in my opinion. That's kind of how I view these people. I think that it's a more comfortable thing to believe that there's a conspiracy afoot rather than accepting that people by their very nature can be quite evil and quite horrible, and that the baby chuckers, okay, it's a Nazi reference, blah, 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 but it was pretty relevant that the people who are willing to exert power over others in any way, they're always around us. And it always it only takes, it wasn't just a German exclusive thing, it just takes the right pressures and opportunity, and they just dive in.
So you're saying that rather than there's this vast left-wing conspiracy to control people, it's more just an opportunity of like-minded people and the kind of the momentum of a culture and groupthink kind of pushing a culture a certain direction.
Yeah. Groupthink is definitely a factor. I actually got into some hot water.
What?
No.
Weird. When I put on Facebook that my observation is kind of the two greatest conspiracy theories that we are grappling with, and this was kind of back probably around the election time, is on the right, the more QAnon stuff. But I think the America is a racist country is a conspiracy theory, right? And that what both of these things do is they, to me, really look like pseudo-gospels. That's what it looks like, right? It gives us a different answer to the questions of what is the nature of the world, what is the problem in the world, and what is the solution to the problem, and then what's your role in it, right? And those are ultimate questions that Christianity gives an ultimate answer to, right? But the QAnon and the BLM kind of narrative Those are pseudo gospels too. They give you a different answer to what's the nature of reality.
Sure, it's
right?
an alternative worldview.
Yeah, that's right.
And
they posit the different, each of them have a different problem,
Sure, different
right?
salvation, different answers.
That's exactly right. And then your solution or your role actually helps you participate in righting this great wrong, right? And in essence, makes you the savior. So
They have their own functional salvation that they
That's
offer.
right.
Like every
Right.
conspiracy theory,
Right.
is salvific in some
That's right.
form.
What does the QAnon, what's the QAnon salvation? Because I thought QAnon was like lizard people, child molesting, pizza eaters.
It really depends on the spectrum.
yeah,
Because QAnon is a spectrum. Just like the left has
Just like
their
Antifa
spectrum of
is a
exactly.
spectrum.
So I've met some people that I can kind of see some of the Q stuff. It seems like okay, maybe it's plausible, but I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole in there's going to be an alien invasion that's going to take over the world.
Yeah.
but from the people, so I didn't think that I knew any Q people, and then there was some of it that kind of resurfaced, that's kind of surfaced as I spent a little more time thinking about it, connected with more people. But really it is, from the people I've talked to, a desire to purge the government and what they believe is a world authority from corrupt, child molesting swamp people, right? Who really want to control and reshape the entire world. And I'm like, well, that is the calling of a hero, right? And that is like the righting of wrongs almost on a cosmic level.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, so you're actually like living out, you want too little. That's what I want to say to both of these camps, right? You want too little. You are made to overturn wrongs and to be reborn and to be renewed and right the wrongs. And of course, Christianity demands justice, especially for the most vulnerable. And my BLM friends are like, we want justice for our black, brothers and sisters. And the Q people are like, we want justice for all of these, for people that are being trampled over by these global powers, right? And I just think you want too little. Your goals are too small. Your worldview is too small. But if you don't want the ultimate story and the ultimate worldview and the ultimate gospel, you'll create one for yourself.
Sure.
And so I see them creating some for both of our political persuasions.
Sure. It seems like it's easy, especially in this kind of in the last year where the culture's gone, to get sucked into one of these because, like any good lie, there's an element of truth.
That's exactly right.
I don't know. Stacey, you looked like you were going to say something.
No, I'm just listening.
I wanted to say
Oh,
something.
sorry. You look
Yeah.
like Stacey. My
So
apologies.
one thing that we haven't really done for the listeners so much is give a strict definition of conspiracy theory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, give it to the
So-
talkers too.
So
Yeah.
I had to just goggle it. A belief that some covert but influential organization is responsible for a circumstance or event. I feel like that's applicable, and that's broad and broad enough that it's So the word that I kind of focused on there is covert. Covert.
Yeah.
But in preparation for today, I was thinking about conspiracy theories all the way back to first century Christians. So Jesus was a controversial figure.
A rabble-rouser.
A rabble-rouser, right, yeah. So he dies, he raises from the dead, and so the disciples are going around and people are spreading the news hey, this guy Jesus, he rose from the dead. I mean, how do you think that would have been received in the first century? People would have been like,
You stole
Nuts.
it.
bro, you are crazy.
Yeah, you stole
Yeah.
the body.
Yeah, you stole the body, right? But what makes that conspiracy theory at the time, which now is mainstream thought, what makes that conspiracy theory different than, say, the conspiracy theories of our modern day age?
I mean, I think there's certain things that are consistent with conspiracies. One is, you can't disprove a negative. So most conspiracies, the lack of evidence is proof that it's true, which doesn't work.
Right.
I think too, like you're alluding to, Stacy, it usually requires a lot of people sharing a lie and being consistent with it and no one stepping out of line. I mean, what's it like? I think to the 9/11 conspiracy. I'm like, how many people would have to be involved in order for it to be an inside job to take down the towers? And what's the likelihood that no one's going to be like, maybe this is wrong. Maybe I'm going to speak out.
Right.
I mean, the likelihood that could be not only pulled off, because, especially when you involve the government, you've got a lot of times, the same people being like, the government's behind this conspiracy, but they're totally inept and they can't they can't run the IRS.
Yeah, those two
It's like,
things
well,
can't be true
which
at
is
once.
it? Like, are they, you know, demigods
Nefarious,
that are controlling
yeah.
the world, or are they
4D
totally inept that can't
chessers.
run an
Yeah.
administration?
Yeah,
you know?
George Bush was a slack-jawed yokel, and he's responsible for 9/11.
Right. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, so there's usually this disconnect from reality and logic and consistency. I didn't directly answer your question, but that's just kind of something I think about, you know, kind of a theme through conspiracies is it requires a lot of people being on the same page and no one speaking out, you know.
Yeah,
What's the
so-
likelihood of that being able to be pulled off?
Yeah, so I think like my question, what I'm getting at is like, so you have this first century, you know, conspiracy theory that this man, Jesus Christ, raised from the dead. And so people are like, is it true? Is it not true? You know, it's definitely not mainstream thought. Now here we are many years later going, no, it's true. But it's taken a long time to get to that place. So when I think about that conspiracy theory versus conspiracy theories now, to me, it implicates the word intent. Like, what was the intent of that particular theory, which is now, hey, we accept this as like the word of God. You know, we accept it as like the ultimate truth. So what's the intent there versus, say, the intent of QAnon or, you know, some of the left's like Antifa or something like that? What's the intent?
I mean, I'd say one of the big difference is the level of commitment it requires. These days, like, if you're a BLM person, like, it doesn't require anything of you because it's mainstream. If you're, you know, whatever, but back in Jesus' day, if you were a follower of Jesus,
It was gonna cost
you be,
you.
yeah, would you be willing to die for something you know is a lie?
Right.
Like Paul and the apostles, like,
Yeah.
like they were, you know, they were martyred for a lie. Like,
Yeah.
that's hard to believe, you know. And when you look at scripture and, you know, actual historical evidence, it's not written in a way that someone who's trying to make an argument would write. They wouldn't say the first person to see Jesus raised was a woman. Like, why would they do that?
Right.
Like, you're not going to make a point that way when women
Right.
are allowed to
They can't
testify in
even
court because they're
testify.
not trusted.
Right.
Like, that's not the narrative you would write if you're trying to convince someone of a conspiracy.
Well, and I think about Chuck Colson, who was part of a conspiracy, you know, to commit the crimes at Watergate and cover it up and all of that. And he said, my experience at Watergate told me that the Gospels are true, right? Because you had like 9 guys involved in the Watergate scandal and cover up, and they're like, we couldn't keep a secret. We couldn't even keep our lives straight,
Right.
for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Then we all broke down. Right, but you're telling me that these 12 guys,
Yeah,
you know,
no.
back in Jesus' day, all maintained the same lie perfectly till they died as martyrs, and didn't crack under, you know, government interrogation and
Yeah, right.
and
The Roman
right,
government,
yeah.
yeah.
You know, so no, like I've seen men try to lie to cover things up, and it doesn't go well.
And there's so many of these conspiracies are, you know, our leadership is at the root. You know, they're the responsible parties, yet we are being governed by the most inept. Insert nice word
Right.
here.
But how do you feel, Stacy?
These people are tards.
That's the second time I've heard that word this week.
My apologies.
No, I
Have you
appreciate
been
that.
hanging with Stacy a lot?
Nah, just a client.
It's appalling. I mean, really, it's appalling. So that they would be that these people that fail upward are capable of orchestrating. I mean, our president can't even wipe his own ass.
Is that a conspiracy?
That might be
It's a fact.
What's the
I
intent?
know a guy in the White House. He told me.
Yeah, is he the butt wiper? Actually, I know that Joe Biden.
He's a single play.
No, he likes to run around naked when
Doesn't
he was
everybody?
being watched. Yeah, but in front of all of his Secret Service guy,
that's
he
a
was a
weird
big
man.
nudie guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember what they called him,
Surprised me.
but
Was he going around smelling all their hair?
probably. What a pervert.
So let me ask you this about, because I
Yeah.
haven't thought a lot about conspiracy theories.
Right.
So to me, one other way to know it's a conspiracy theory is it's not supported by reality, right? Now, again, that's a question of authority, I think, is what sources are you viewing as authoritative? Because I think both for the BLM kind of conspiracy and the QAnon conspiracy, you can find sources that support all of your claims, right? That
Well, are you saying that the BLM is not a covert conspiracy? I think that.
But they think it is, right? Maybe you can't measure the racism, right? Now it's a racism that is, you can only see in your implicit biases, right?
So what you're saying is critical race theory is the conspiracy,
Sure.
not BLM. BLM is simply a response to the
So BLM is living out the principles prescribed in
Sure,
CRT.
that's an organization that
Right.
has
Okay.
embodied
Yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
principles.
Right,
Okay.
because CRT, critical theory itself, the three kind of bases is it has to posit a utopia, it has to critique, that's the critical part, the aspects of the current system that fall short, and then the third part of the critical theory is it has to prescribe actions for the activist, for the person on the ground, right? They have to have this critical role in bringing up, dismantling the system to get you to utopia. So BLM is that third part, right? That manifestation, what we can do.
Yeah.
But there's no legal evidence of discrimination against blacks, right? It has been illegal since the 60s. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's like you said, you can find little bits. Like there's horrible, horrible videos of white police officers harming black people, right?
Sure.
Seen in context, there's a lot fewer of them, right? But you can find these little shreds to support your theory. And it's the same with QAnon, right? You can find these little shreds or little moments.
Bill
or
Clinton on Epstein's plane to
Sure.
Lolita
Yep.
Island, or the Lolita Express
Right.
to the raped teenage girl island.
Yep. So you can find these little wisps, but the question for me is if a conspiracy theory, what makes it that is that when you look at, the whole council of reality, it falls apart.
Sure.
But
Well, I
now-
think one of the natures of that is that there's not a lot of evidence, and it's usually accusation-based, claim-based, but they're not verifiable.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Unless you have a secret knowledge.
And then you listen to Art Bell for 15 years, and you know that people have been spotting UFOs. And
Who's Art Bell?
oh,
You don't know
babe.
who our Bell is?
No, I don't.
You don't listen to conservative talk radio?
I
like
spend
one in the morning?
I spend all day reading the Bible. I don't actually have time
Bless
for a
your
lot of
heart.
that.
And when you're not reading, you're listening on audio.
You're darn right I am.
ESV, right?
I can't. Art Bell is like the guru of late night talk, and he would have all sorts of conspiracy people call in, Bigfoot sightings, people that claim to have backwards engineered the UFO that crashed at Area 51, and every Sunday he would do a program called Dreamland from the Kingdom of Nye. He was at Nye County in Arizona. And so he would do a long-form interview with some of these people. I mean, at Thetans and all sorts of awesome stuff.
He pretty much entertains any conspiracy theory, and he doesn't debunk it. He just runs with it, gets
Wow.
it going.
Oh, he was
Okay.
he was such a star.
Feed that crocodile.
I loved it. I loved Art Bell. But for all of these years, people have been screaming about UFOs, right? And oh no. And now we actually have the Pentagon acknowledging, yes, this is footage of unidentified objects that completely go against the laws of physics. If there's another country that has this kind of technology, they would have already taken care of things. We would have been toast. They have footage of these ships, for lack of a better word, buzzing our aircraft carriers. One vessel dives into the water, shoots out in two pieces, and shoots off at Mach a billion, because we just don't have the technology to accelerate in this
Science.
fashion.
Yeah.
Okay, so
UFOs are no longer conspiracy theories. So mark that off the list.
right, mark that off the list. But okay, they've been lying the whole time. There's been footage of this for decades.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but
This
what's the
whole
difference?
episode's a
I know,
tangent.
this is a
Yeah,
whole tangent.
for real.
So you've got your conspiracy theories, you've got lies, they're lying to us, but then you've also got, governments are, have classified stuff. So I mean, you could say that classified information is them lying to us if they're not letting it in, the world on it, and there's kind of a gray line, between all that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Christian, I guess where do we go with?
Yeah. Let
kind of
me bring this back, right?
Why we're having so much fun out here in the fringes.
Rein it in.
Rein it in.
Facilitate.
Katie, you had you'd asked a question. Can you ask that question again if you remember it? About I know it's been 5 minutes since
There's
you
been
asked
lots
that
of
question.
questions. I don't know. Just
It was on the knowledge or the lack of knowledge or reality of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, just it's probably verifiable by a sliver of reality, but is it verifiable when you hold it against the complete reality?
Sure.
Right, all the data.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. So, ultimately where we want to end up going with this episode is we're going to ask the question is like, how should Christians respond to conspiracy theories? Not how should Christians necessarily do away with those things, because the conspiracy theories are always going to exist. So I, again, in my infinite preparation for this show, I read an article, and I'll read a paragraph that I thought was great. And this is from the Gospel Coalition, and it's specifically on conspiracy theories. Their response to it, but it says this: many Christian philosophers define propositional knowledge that an entire proposition is true, as a justified true belief. To have knowledge is to represent reality in thought or experience the way it really is on the basis of adequate grounds. Because the sole grounds for conspiracy theories is unreliable hearsay. They do not meet the standard for knowledge.
So that's pretty much what I just said.
But with
a lot more academic and clinical.
But with bitter words.
So conspiracy theories, like as much as, and again, like there's that word in there, theory. Like we use that. A lot of people treat evolutional theory as fact, but it still remains a theory.
Right.
Like it's not necessarily proven and widely held belief as complete and true fact.
Right.
If it was, then it would not be evolution theory anymore.
Right.
Well, that also requires kind of delving into like how the sciences deal with things, which it's customary for something to be a working theory until it's basically supplanted by something else.
Right,
the evolutionary theory,
Until
I mean,
it becomes
like
a
we
law.
understand, Einstein's theory of relativity, which didn't exist before that theory, and there might be something else that replaces that. But for now, we understand physics to be physics, but that might change,
Sure. So we have theories, right? So we have these conspiracy theories that, as a body of believers, we are encountering and we're dealing with. And so what we find now, that I think this is why the topic is interesting to me, is people engaging in tribalism.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're going straight into, I think, the bigger, more important part of this conversation.
Perfect. I knew that's where I was going.
Christians need, there's no better place to hide for somebody that needs to not engage in life than a conspiracy theory.
Absolutely.
It ruins your life. It ruins your family life. There's something deeper going on with people, I think, who really become obsessed. And the tribalism thing, people simply want to belong. So when you find these little niche rather.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. So, I'm the word lady. I gotta,
niche rhymes with quiche.
Quiches, yes, gotta get it right. When you find these other people that share this similar belief that you do, and they've got information that could confirm your bias, and these are obviously your people, and you start to turn away. Obviously, for the Christian, I'd say that's the enemy hard at work. Just putting all the pieces together for you so that life is entirely avoided, and none of you are smart enough to understand how important this is and the powers at work, and then your life is ripped asunder and you've handed it over because you're addicted.
Yeah.
You belong.
Well, because it gives you something that you legitimately need, which is community and belonging and identity, right? So again, like it does create, it's a false gospel. Our gospel actually does tell us who we are and where we belong, right? You belong to God, your identity in Christ, and you belong with your church community. But I'll tell you what, BLM and the critical race theorists, you put your black square up on Instagram, or you put your BLM sign in your front yard,
identified your tribe.
Yeah, and it's like, I
Not
belong.
actual relationships.
No.
Right.
But like, these
Or
are my
shallow
people.
ones.
I belong with them. Hey, look, we're all in this together. But again, those movements give you too little.
So-
It's too small.
So I know you wanted to say something, Christian. I'll make it quick. So that's why I come back to this word intent. So you have the conspiracy theory that Jesus Christ raised from the dead. Okay, so the intent there wasn't to pit people against people, right? So the idea is really, it implicates the doctrine of sin. And there's a really fancy, you can ask your husband, he'll know it is it hermeneutology? Anyway, doctrine of sin, it implicates the doctrine of sin. So Jesus comes in to deal with sin and to literally create the most diverse culture of people under him. And so and to worship God and to have us all engage in what our primary identity is, which is worshipers of God, which is children of God. And so then if you say, okay, well, that is the function of that conspiracy theory that we now know as Christianity, then what is the function and the intent of, say, QAnon or Black Lives Matter? Is it to really unite everybody?
No.
Is it really to...
Thanks for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Is it really about diversity, the way that we see biblical diversity? You know, is it really, if that's even a thing? But so I look closely at like what makes Christianity different than, say, you know, if somebody's saying, well, Christianity is a conspiracy theory, what makes it different than the other conspiracy theories? Like, God pursues us in John 3:16 to the point of death so that we might be reconciled. So Jesus Christ is a propitiation for us so that we can be reconciled. I don't see these other conspiracy theories doing that.
Well, what's their end goal?
What's their salvation
They just
plan?
want to tear it down. I mean, there's no resurrection.
Right, and so, and this is where it's dangerous for Christians, is like, now these conspiracy theories are mixing in with Christian theology. I've nationalism, QAnon, social justice now are becoming synonymous with the gospel. Jesus Christ is no longer being seen as a reconciler, as a redeemer. He's being seen as a revolutionary.
Right. Well, and you can't just mesh two incompatible worldviews and say that they're complementary when they're not. You know, when something like critical theory comes in and redefines the world order as the power group you belong to or the racial group you belong to, well, now you're changing the gospel. You're replacing the gospel.
Right.
I mean, I appreciate you queuing up my point here. You know, Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
I know.
Yeah.
You're great. You know, you're talking about the intent, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing to remember. Like, if you know our listeners or viewers are you find yourself kind of being drawn into some of these, you know, believing in some of these conspiracies, one way to kind of bring you back to reality that I find is asking the question, why? To what end?
Yeah.
There's a good friend of ours who lives in North Carolina, and we have these interesting discussions, but she's going down this rabbit hole of you know, vaccinations. And it's this conspiracy of controlling you, this and that, and they're going to, like, it's changing your DNA. And I'm like, but why? I mean, like, you know, for a conspiracy to work, you basically have to expect and accuse the other side of the worst intents while you have the purest of intents. And, you know, like, we could have discussions about whether or not the vaccines are good or bad and shutdowns and all that kind of stuff, but that's much less about science and more about, you know, social reconstruction. But if you're starting to go down a rabbit hole of, like, no, they're injecting things into you and micro robots and this, I'm like, why? I mean, like, what would the benefit of that be? Why would they do that? That just doesn't make any sense.
And ultimately,
no point to it, you know?
And ultimately, like, the people that are engaging in these conspiracy theories, like, what does that do for you in terms, like, does that really change anything for you in terms of your belief in Christ? Does that? You know, but it seemingly is. It's seemingly people are starting to believe, Christians starting to believe, we need to get up and we need to fight. And I'm like, okay, we do follow a God that laid down his life, right? So what does fighting actually look like? You know, does it mean taking up arms and pushing back and fighting like some more nationalistic alt-right people might say? Or what does it mean? And so that's where I'm maybe we can start wrapping up here, is what should our response
up?
I know, right?
Yeah, well, we've just got plenty of time
going.
here.
Don't we
Come
have
on,
places to be and people
We got
to...
a whole half an hour.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, never mind. We don't got to wrap up. So, but what should our response be as Christians to conspiracy theories? Because, I mean, we're in an age now where you can't just kind of sit on the fence and go, well, you know, they just kind of, whatever, they believe what they believe. You know, everybody now has to have a response.
That's right.
I think that the most important thing to remember for Christians is that the world is rife with sin, and people are in the grips of evil. And maybe that comes as you face down a lion on the Serengeti. Maybe that comes because your father is molesting you, or maybe that comes from a billionaire with a megalomaniac, a penchant for, world domination. Like, maybe it comes in the form of bad medicine. It's not different. It's not new. And don't fall into the trap of thinking we're just all so different, so informed, so we've got all the information that makes us wildly arrogant and woefully undereducated. It couldn't happen to us because we're just so damn smart, and yet look at what is happening in our country. We should all understand the basic foundational principles of the United States, yet apparently many do not.
Yeah.
Well, and I think when it comes to trying to parse out these issues, it can be helpful to make a distinction. Like, the things that God tells us to stand firm on are the things that he cares about, the things that we're called to by him. And as much as I, love America and my freedoms and stuff, that's different than what God calls us to. Like, that's great, and I think the gospel, by and large, is a gospel of freedom. Like, it's to set us free from sin, from our own selfishness, our own own folly, and that requires us submitting to God. And so when we start talking about, like, what are we willing to stand up for, and we need to be looking to what God's calling us to the gospel, not necessarily my American rights are being trampled. Like, maybe that's something worth, standing up to. But, if we're talking physical, a call to arms, we better be darn sure that's God's calling and not some Americanized version of that.
That's beautiful. What I'm thinking of right now is the most difficult directive for me to follow is to love my neighbor, because I despise my neighbor. I have a lot of hate in my heart. I'm a sinner. This is true. I look at the way that my neighbors behave and I think they're ruining it for my children, right? But I also ask my children the one thing that they would say, what's your mantra? What's your mom's mantra? What has she made sure that you know? And they would all say that the only thing that we leave this life with is relationships. That's it. That is paramount. It's most important. And that means love your neighbor.
Even when it's hard and you don't want to?
Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard and you don't want to, right? I mean, just like the freedom of speech is not, for Taylor Swift. And so when a Christian, when I am in a situation where I'm thinking, these are the enemy, rabbit hole, dive straight in, I would think asking myself, how am I protecting relationships? How am I looking to the world?
Yeah.
Do I look different? Or am I undercutting the gospel and how Jesus has directed me to live because I think somehow I know more because I found some website, or confirmation bias is all around me, so it must be true. Well, is it destroying your relationships? Is it destroying your family? Is it isolating you? Those are the questions I think any Christian should ask themselves.
I think that's a great point. Like, if we, knowingly kind of, seeing where we are as a culture, refuse to play by the culture's rules, of critical theory and whatnot, we also need to push back against who they're defining the enemy as.
Right. So that's I think is the main point is, we did used to have a blog, and the tagline was where ideas, not people, are under attack. Right? Where we, you need to destroy bad ideas. And Christians need to be able to do it better than anybody else, right? Like, we are warned in Scripture, not to be taken captive by hollow and deceptive philosophies that have the appearance of holiness, but lack the ability to transform you and save you, right? And so we just finished reading through 1st and 2nd Corinthians in my little Bible study, and Paul is constantly refuting bad ideas, right? Because ideas have consequences. Bad ideas have victims, right? And every level of our leadership, from national down to state. And now, unfortunately, a lot of churches are being infected by bad ideas, and they produce victims. And as Christians, we don't make victims, right? We protect victims. And so in today's America, and probably a lot of places around the world, your activism probably should include being the most informed, right? Being the most well-versed, right? Being the most biblically grounded, but then also understanding, being able to identify authoritative sources so that you can refer to them, right? Because you need to be able to make a compelling case, because when you don't, people will be victimized, right?
Sure. So I mean, how? So in this, cultural moment we're in, how do you do that? Because I long for the day when you used to be able to, say, hey, I believe this idea is more true than that idea. Let's have a discussion. While it's increasingly, people seem to like their worldview necessitates that they can't even have a conversation about ideas because they don't realize, because their whole worldview has been reshaped into it's not about ideas, it's about who the group you identify with, and so you're the good or bad based on that group, not on. And even like your ideas are more or less true based on what group you're part of. Right. Like how do you combat that when we used to be able to say, let's have this discussion about whether or not these ideas are good, and then decide what truth is, versus, well, you're a bad person because you're not part of you're part of an oppressing group of people.
How do you combat that? So, and I think what I want to say answers that. But I'm glad that Stacy, you mentioned something like, man, you struggle. What you were saying, like, or you hate your neighbor.
I do.
Yeah. And so, reading this week on this topic, this issue of sin of slander. Like I've never, that's a particular sin that I've never really spent much time looking at.
What is slander? It's not like a normal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, slander.
Term.
So I mean, it's talking poorly, it's talking badly about a friend, neighbor, family member.
Specifically lying about them.
Yes.
Yeah, the slander is like untrue information.
Which is still a legal term.
Whether it be intentional or unintentional, right? So.
How do you lie unintentionally?
Maybe you spread information that you're uninformed about, and you don't know it's initially a lie, and then eventually you find out that it is.
You mean
I think tons of people are lying unintentionally these days, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, those people are the reason why we're still in lockdown,
right?
They did it because they're getting bad information, right? And they're repeating bad information.
So this issue on this loving your neighbor, we see pretty clearly. I'm going to read this scripture in its entirety out of Matthew 5. So, and this is Jesus talking, and specifically the subtitle is "Love Your Enemies." You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I just lost my place. So that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and more, are you doing... Sometimes the words here don't always flow. And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And so there's another thing that's also showing up in here, not just sin of slander, but like sin of partiality.
Yes.
And you see that, I think I misquoted scripture in a previous episode. It was out of 1 Timothy. That's, was wrong. It was in the book of James that talks about partiality. So here we have some really strong commands from Christ, talking about loving your enemies. And the implication is like, you can't really love your enemy, and you can't really love people that disagree with you if you're lying about them, if you're slandering them, right? Like you can't do that. So I think there's a really strong command here. And so when we're engaging in conspiracy theories, that inevitably leads to tribalism. That inevitably leads to like pointing your finger at somebody else and going, "You're an idiot. You're wrong." You're inferior. You're less than. So I don't know how conspiracy theories can't lead to this issue of sin of slander.
Right. Well, and honestly, that us versus them, using it in different context, is pretty important, right? It's important for gaining power, honestly, is you have to have a group that is demonized. And I feel like I've seen a shift. I didn't used to be super political, but I remember even 10 or 15 years ago, you could be like, well, I disagree with you. Well, I disagree. Well, I think you're an idiot. Well, I think you're an idiot, right? But you can talk to somebody that you think is an idiot.
Yeah.
But we have degenerated to the point where we go, you're not an idiot. You're evil. You're a Nazi.
You're a subclass.
You're a subclass, and I won't engage or be friends with or talk to somebody who's evil.
I won't even have a conversation
I won't
with
even
you.
have
Right.
a conversation,
Right.
right? And so, to me, to your point, sometimes you can't have conversations, right, with people. But the good news is that we don't, as it says in Romans 12, in as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. Doesn't always depend on you, right? And for me, my default is to appease people because I don't want to lose the relationship. My default is I will hide or I will cover up something that I really think so I can keep the peace. So,
Which is exactly how the church is failing.
yes, because we succumb, right? I have to have God's power in me to not do that.
Amen.
And it's hard
Yeah,
because
amen.
I want to keep my friends, So what you're saying is, what do Christians do? How do we engage? What I see all throughout scriptures, I don't see examples except, there's Old Testament examples of being aggressors when it comes to taking the Holy Land and the Promised Land and all of that. But for the New Testament church, I don't see examples of Christians when it comes to other people being aggressors.
Yes.
Right? We are not there to start fights. We're not there to pick fights. We are there to stand firm. Right? And you need to plant your feet and you don't let anybody move you. You don't let anybody move you. Sometimes you will lose friends, right? But losing friends is not the mark of success.
Yeah.
No.
Obedience to Christ is the mark of
Amen.
success.
Amen.
And whoever's watching, it might not be about that friend. They might not have been a friend to you in the first place. But like you were saying, how do you engage with people that, won't even have the conversation, don't even want to talk to you? It's costly, but you continue to have the conversation in order for those who are paying attention to see how that happens. And maybe you're changing hearts and minds in a more subversive way. Even online, right? If you're embroiled in some ridiculous thing that you're like, why on earth did I even respond to this?
Yeah.
You carry on with dignity and self-respect and demonstrate to anybody who might be watching, this is how it's done.
That's
Yeah.
exactly
and you
right.
are blameless.
That's right. And
Right?
beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. And
Yes.
people
And
watch you
loving.
and you go, man, I hate what she's saying, but
Damn.
wow.
Yeah.
So gentle, so loving, so gracious, so unassuming.
It looks different.
Yeah.
And to add to your point, I think like our actions as Christians will always kind of implicate or be indicative of what we think and believe about God.
Right.
So like here we have really strong commands in Matthew 5. I mean, don't you think that we believe in an all-powerful, God's everywhere and all-knowing, that if we follow what Matthew 5 says as Christians, that God's going to go, hey, I see that. And he's going to continue to use our actions to change hearts.
Right.
But what we're not seeing in Christian culture right now is that.
Right.
What we're seeing is like, I need to take matters into my own hands because on a subconscious level, I don't really believe God's going to do anything.
Well, you've got the two opposites, right? And this kind of, I think, aligns with our. We all kind of fall either on the truth teller spectrum,
Yeah.
right? Where we go out with the sword and we slash and we slash,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what the relational cost is. And then you've got the grace givers, right? Who are like, I just want everyone to be okay,
Yeah.
right? And so it's good. We need to be filled with grace and truth, right? But we have got to follow Christ to where he wants us to go, and we can't allow our default settings to rule us. There are times where we need to pull out the sword of truth and speak boldly, and there's times where we need to sheathe that sword, right? Because that's what meekness really is I could obliterate you, but
Power under control.
power under control.
And that's why it's important that as Christians, going back to your point, that we need to be really informed when
Yes.
we need to know our Bible. We need to know how to distinguish truth from not truth, from lies. And so, like, realistically, truth, simply put, is the gospel. That's it. It's a category of its own. Everything else is up for debate. Everything else is,
So I mean, what to try to drill down a little bit. What's that look like? I like. I'm a good
like
Pharisee.
compartments.
I like compartments and knowing exactly what to do.
What's the next step?
Yeah.
I need a,
So I mean, what does that look like? Because I know for myself, there's been a lot of a fear. I mean, I'm kind of a I want to save those relationships even if what they're speaking is, they're calling good evil and evil good.
My Lord, I was just reading Malachi today with an atheist who lets me read the Bible with him, but
Wow, okay.
That's Malachi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, because my tendency is to not engage online because I know it's going to be ugly. Like, it's not going to be well received, and maybe that's a unique thing, being, a minority of, a conservative and a Christian in a place that is, rabidly liberal and atheist. I mean, what do you do? I mean, like, am I not being faithful by staying silent, when lies are being spoken? And I don't know, I don't know. And I'm sure there's not a blanket answer, but that's my struggle,
I would say if we were just chatting, not on film, and you were really struggling with things that you saw and seeing blatant untruths and damaging things, that you need to do the thing that is hard. Because it's most always right. I can't actually think of an example of when the easy thing is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to get on Facebook after this. I'm going to say, Stacy said, just let it rip. Just keyboard warrior.
No,
Well, you want Stacy
know.
on your side when you're in a keyboard battle. That is for sure, because Stacy is one of those people that articulates things well. She's great in writing, and I will say that if you do have to say something unpopular online, find a friend.
Yeah.
Find a friend.
That is actually really good advice. Find a friend. Get reinforcements. Before you engage in something, let your people know. Listen, I think that this is a hill to die on, and frankly, I don't wanna. But I
Be faithful.
I have to speak the truth here.
Yeah.
And I can't really do it alone with courage.
Yeah.
Because it sucks and it's hard. And who wants to dive in? But really, when you think about this is really difficult. So we don't live in a time where we have to have 15 babies, so 4 will survive. We didn't, kill more men in our country and have no men to marry and live in the devastated South, I mean, we can be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sure. So I guess, to your point, that gives us some perspective. Like, we're not fighting for survival these days. Like,
Yeah.
you might have a little social stigma attached to you, and that's.
And let me tell you what, it's not actually real.
Okay.
It's not, none of it's real. Don't be afraid of the mob. Both Katy and I have had the mob come after us in real time, at places we work. Places I worked, they came after the church. And they're still screaming on the internet, and we have a book. We didn't shut up. They didn't quell us. They didn't scare us away. And yeah, it sucked. It totally sucked. And especially when the mob is faceless, then that means it's everyone.
They're hiding behind the anonymity.
It's everyone.
So Stacy naturally will go out with a sword, a sharp sword, right, into the battles that need to be fought. I'm hesitant, right? So if my advice to you, because it's my advice to me, is when I know that I have to have a difficult conversation, not necessarily online, but usually in person.
Those are going to be the most productive. Really.
Right. Well, but also very costly, right? If you're going to tell something to somebody that they don't want to hear, look, I know you're considering divorce. Your kids are not going to be fine, right? But I understand your marriage is struggling, right? And I know how painful that is because we've been walking this road together for a long time. Okay, but you know that you need to say something. So this is what I do, and it might be cheating, but it works. I say, God, I know what you want me to say, but how about this? You open the door. You let her literally beg for me to say it to her, and then I will. And God honors that almost 100% of the time, right? I'll go into a difficult conversation and I'll think, okay, here's the things that I know I'm going to sin if I don't say at some point, but I don't want to start that conversation. So would you just hand it to me on a silver platter, right? Literally let them say, I was wondering about whether or not moving to Florida is a good idea with my 2 children. What do you think? And then I tell God, if you do that and you open the door, I will not flinch to say what you've put on my heart. Right? So to me, that is a bit of a divine collaboration, where I'm saying I'm willing to do the hard thing, but would you tee it up for me?
Would you just kind of kick me right
Yeah.
over the...
And we see that with a good example of Moses.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know.
Which one? There's lots of Moses.
Well, just Moses in general. Like he was, God asked him to do a very, very hard thing, and he like negotiated with God. He's like, I'll do it, you know. And then Aaron ultimately comes along and like really helps him partners out. But he like, you know, he had to do a lot of divine collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. And then there was also that. Also, who made your face? Who made your mouth? I did. So go.
And isn't that the point? I think that we all get so focused on the here and now, but when you know that the truth is not being spoken and it's in serving evil and nefarious purposes, there's only one person that you actually have to answer to.
Right.
Sure.
If people are being victimized and you don't speak up, especially if children are being victimized and you don't speak up, I think there was something about, like, put your feet in cement, throw you in a river. That's what you deserve, right?
Millstone around the neck.
Millstone around the neck,
Yeah.
right? Well,
Yeah.
you know, people don't know millstone.
Well, and
That's true.
even if it's not so serious as children being victimized and like not an obvious victim, but poisonous thinking.
Well, that's it. The
You
bad
know?
ideas have victims.
They do have consequences eventually, and so when you follow that road, and you see very clearly where it leads. Also, just, you know, Socratic method. Just ask the question.
So
You know?
So in all this, maybe to answer practically for our listeners, I think that there's one thing for sure that God gives liberally and asks us to pray for regularly. That's wisdom and discernment. You know, and so like one thing for all our listeners, if you love Jesus, like you need to have a very, very, very active, vigilant prayer life. Like you can't say that you're a Christian and you don't pray, because that's like being a human being that doesn't eat or drink any food or water. Okay, so practically speaking, we need to be praying for wisdom and discernment regularly, because without that, we may not know where to speak truth, because we could fall into a situation where we're only speaking truth all the time, and it could actually end up like hurting some relationships or
Needlessly.
Yeah, needlessly. And so like there is importance in praying for wisdom and discernment, because it'll help us with strategy. So like I would say, you know, unless at least on online, there's probably not a lot of times I felt super convicted where I'm like, yeah, I need to speak into this situation. Right? But like God gives everybody gifts. Everybody gifts and strengths to be able to speak truth. So for me, I'm like, you know, I don't need to go online, but I have an opportunity through my counseling practice to sit down one-on-one and tell somebody like, hey, what you're doing in your marriage, that's wrong. Like, here's an opportunity to see Christ. We also have an opportunity on this podcast to tell people, just like you guys have an opportunity through your books, hopefully books.
Oh, there's books.
Through your writing to share truth. And so I think that's where we ask God, we always want to be asking God. You see that throughout the Old Testament, you see that through the New Testament. Bring every single petition and request to God, run it by God, and go, hey, what do you think? So we need to have a very active prayer life, be praying specifically for wisdom and discernment liberally. That's the only time I really like using the word liberal.
Liberal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a good kind of ending note is just echoing and reiterating, you know, what you're saying, Stacy. I mean, at the end of the day, are we going to live to please people or to please God? Because God's the only one that we're accountable to and and have to answer to.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and if God isn't your God, you'll worship something else.
Sure. Yeah.
And that something else is going to ultimately demand human sacrifice. Well, they all do, right? It's just that Jesus was ours.
Yeah.
And it will disappoint.
Yeah, it will. Yep.
Men will always fail you.
Yep.
Truth. Right there.
All right,
Truth.
why don't you bring us home, Christian?
Okay. Well, parting thoughts and comments, ladies?
Do you know? I don't think you want to give us that much.
Okay. Well,
yes.
yes, go. Katie, go.
Subscribe to this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. I've listened to these guys a lot. You're finding an incredible mixture of biblical truth, right? Real life wisdom, humility, vulnerability. And other than a lack of Jesus, what this world is missing the most is good men.
Good men right here.
Good men, right? So there's a good chance that you don't have good men in your life. Thank you, internet, because you can tune in and find them, okay? Honestly, if you are a guy listening to this and struggling and figuring out how do I become a good man, right? Drink deeply of manly wisdom, right? You're not going to be transformed and changed by listening to women, right? Find good men that you can pattern yourselves after. And you've got 2 of them here.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you. That means a lot. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and the topic, and I'm going to go back and listen to it a lot. I don't go back and listen to all the episodes because I don't like hearing myself talk, but I will definitely go back.
Oh, testify.
Yeah, but I will go back and listen to this one for sure. Dads, moms, husbands, fathers, men that are getting married, or hopefully, or single dads, what have you. We love you. We care about you. We desperately want to see Jesus transform your life, and so please do reach out to us. We do pray for you. At least I know I do. I don't think Christian does, but no, but we do pray for you. We do care about you, and we appreciate all the feedback and the encouragement and the comments. If there's topics that you want us to cover, we certainly would love to hear that. We're going to keep coming up with the topics that we feel are relevant, and we're always going to tie it back to Christ, because in the end, that is the core central purpose to our lives as men, fathers, and husbands, and mothers, women, all the above there. We're made in His image. We're made to worship God. And so we have a real life Savior, Jesus Christ. So follow us on Instagram, Facebook, the YouTubes. Follow us there. Check us out. We do have a YouTube channel. I keep mentioning that. I keep forgetting about it, but we do have one. And so please do follow us. Go buy their book. You will not be disappointed one bit. They will also sign the book for you if you mail it to them. No, I'm kidding. They won't do that.
We might.
They might. Who knows?
We'll send you a picture of our signatures.
Paste it in.
But please do check out Them Before Us, because this is one of those times, historical moments that happen where this is really worth paying attention to. This is really like the first child advocates, rights advocates, I can't say that word, movement that you need to be paying attention to. So we don't want to be sacrificing child rights on the altar of human desire. And this is something that we see happening repeatedly throughout the course of human history, and Jesus comes to right that. So please do go buy that book. Like the second you stop listening to this episode, go buy the book.
Yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Go do it. So in the meantime, everybody, we appreciate you. We love you. Go drink a good glass of whiskey while reading Them Before Us.
Ooh. Whiskey and Them Before Us.
That's what I did.
Give that a try.
That's what I did.
This is amazing.
This is so good.